The two wings of Luffy versus the two supernovas who took down an emperor. Who would win if these two duos were to come head to head? Well, today me and Aero will be doing our best to answer the question and go over all possible scenarios.
Hello everyone, it's your boy Aero Flame back again. The two wings of YouTube to handle this 2v2.
I'm not gonna lie, I think regardless we're gonna get called biased, but out of all the versus matches we've talked about together, this is definitely the closest one. With that being said, I'll firstly be going over the supernova duo, as their scaling is a lot easier to pinpoint, and I haven't really talked about their scaling as much as I have with Sanji and Zoro's. So both Kid and Law initially were portrayed to be relative to a post-Udon training gear for Luffy, fighting on an equal playing field against the Navy similar to what happened in Sabaody, and then performing feats against Kaido but in the end getting overwhelmed. However, this did not stop the duo from growing during Wano, as they would manage to awaken their fruits against Big Mom, and even forcing her to use her full power. Kid mainly had the raw stat advantage, while Law was using his fruit to mainly distract and overwhelm her with his versatility. These combos can include Kid using his magnetism to push and pull Sanji or Zoro into attacks. Meanwhile, Law punctures them, which if he can just use his fruit to its fullest ability, it's kind of a GG. And we also have Law's range just being absolutely crazy with his room, and even with the likes of Kid's magnetism potentially taking Sanji or Zoro off balance since he uses swords. And of course, Kid has his ace in the hole, that being his damn punk. Now, to talk about the potency of damn punk, a lot of people think that Shanks thought that he was going to take serious damage from the attack, and I believed in myself, and that's why he attacked the way he did. But Aero brought it to my attention that if you look at the panels closely, you will see that what is actually happening is that damn punk was going to destroy the fleet and not Shanks' ship, which makes sense since Shanks departed on one ship and only has one ship to his name, so it wasn't a vision of him, but rather the D-tier pirates if they'd gone to try and handle Kid, which was the future Shanks saw. I think Shanks was just wary about having casualties, which, you know, he just prevented that. But let's not discredit Kid here. He was able to make Big Mom bleed with this laser and actually damage her pretty significantly. Law as well, if he can use his fruit like how he did with Big Mom against Sanji and Zoro, it's going to be super annoying to deal with him. You know, he's just going to be teleporting around and maybe shambling one of them into the other's moves, using Gamma Knife to incapacitate them. There's just a lot of options for these two to use. And that's pretty much all I can say about the supernova duo, other than Law was able to scar Blackbeard, but I don't really know how far that goes, and you'll see why in the versus battle. But now to talk about Zoro and Sanji.
Now, Zoro and Sanji as a duo is trickier to determine where they are, since they aren't nearly as close in strength as Kid and Law are, and both of them are obviously much more reliant on Haki. Sanji obviously specializes in observation Haki as per Oda, and he also has good enough observation Haki to dodge future sight users like Katakuri. He can also tell intentions and has a greater awareness of his surroundings than Zoro and arguably Luffy via his observation. Zoro is not shown to be quite as skilled in observation as Sanji, but he's still able to react to attacks from Big Mom and later on Hybrid Kaido. As with the rocks with Mr. One and the water bullets from Hody Jones, Zoro is also capable of using his observation Haki to predict where things are going to end up and respond in turn. Sanji and Zoro, not at their best, are able to take on King and Queen together, with Sanji before his amp not really doing terribly against either one. Sanji versus a king is a debate in and of itself, but Ty's convinced me that Sanji's speed would overcome King's power and should at least be on a similar level to the initial rooftop crew. Queen, although being overwhelmed by Marco, never got perception blitz like he did with Sanji, and Marco alone already can outpace King. So do I think the scaling there is consistent for him being above Marco and Killer, who in the anime are able to at least block Hybrid Kaido? Marco as well also blocked a blast breath from him, so take those feats for what you will. As for Zoro, he's able to block an attack from Big Mom and Kaido for a few seconds and then outpaces and scars Kaido. This attack from Big Mom and Kaido was moving so quickly that Killer says that they can't dodge, referring to him, Law, Kid, and that point at the rooftop fight Luffy, and Zoro is still able to intercept the attack to give them the time to avoid it via Law's shambles. He does get healed after this, but it's only enough to keep him sustained for the rest of Wano, and he isn't really at peak condition. Despite this, Zoro manages to tap into advanced conquers even further, exponentially amping his Haki to new levels. Like going from contending closely with King to pretty much just smashing through his ultimate final attack with just 3 attacks of his own, putting the Zoro who had just had feats of contention contending with a comboed Yonko attack and outpacing a Yonko at an even lower level of power than the Zoro that we see by the end of Wano. It should also go without saying that going into this, Zoro and Sanji have a lot better chemistry and are more used to working together than Law and Kid. Like, throughout the Big Mom fight, these two kept bickering till it was time to lock in, while Zoro and Sanji, when it's needed, will be on some Todo Yuji, it's time to cook, Wombo combo timing. Whether it's fighting two right hands of an emperor or soccer, they just beat the shit out of whatever is in their way.
Now, I think this fight, regardless of the conclusion you come to, is very close. All four fighters are very powerful in their own right, but it is clear there is a stronger fighter of the four, and that goes to Zoro. The reason I say this is because him just using a lick of Conquerors was able to clash with Kaido's Haki, and he tapped into new levels with it, meaning Law and Kid can't just carry with their devil fruits. As we've seen, despite their crazy combos, Big Mom just resists it and overpowers them, which I do think, especially if Law and Zoro are mainly fighting each other, Zoro wouldn't get negged by his fruit abilities. Zoro as well, if he just goes all out off rip, just prevents Law from doing anything due to him just being so much faster than bro. Zoro and Law have similar speed feats when Zoro is legit dying and then he gets advanced Conquerors and obviously isn't injured in this fight. And I think Zoro has what it takes to outspeed and get past his fruit and not just get negged like everyone thinks he would. Now, while these two would be mainly fighting, which I think would happen as they are the stronger of the duo, we'd have Kid and Sanji supporting the other, with Sanji using overwhelming speed to compete with Kid's destructive power. Now, a possibility me and Arrow were thinking is maybe Kid getting past Sanji's speed by pulling him into his attacks with magnetism. But after this, I feel like Sanji could just activate Ifrit Janbei and wouldn't just neg Kid, but would definitely be able to get some devastating hits in. I think despite Zoro being the strongest, Sanji is probably the weakest link here, but the gap I don't think is that ridiculous, at least in comparison to that of Zoro and Law. But if Kid were to, let's say, land a damned punk laser, then obviously he would just one-shot Sanji, but I don't think Sanji would get him to that point, and I think Sanji would be smart enough to dodge this. Like, obviously if Kid just uses a point-blank damn laser in Sanji's face, then Sanji's gonna get one-shotted, but I think Sanji would just never let that happen. And like I said, the gap between Kid and Sanji is not as big as Zoro and Law. Or more like Zoro and the others, but
Zoro and Sanji have a bit of an X factor in the form of their teamwork. Zoro and Sanji, while working together, have shown that they are able to pull off pretty powerful combo attacks intuitively without the real need to communicate. Sanji's armament haki was shown to be greater than or equal to Queen's whilst using Diablo Janbei, and then his base durability after awakening his Germa body is able to snap his sword and then tank attacks from Queen. Ifrit Janbei is then amping that body further with armament. This would mean that Sanji, at the very least, has far greater durability than Queen through the use of armament, and while he may not be able to ignore the power of Law's fruit like Zoro, he should be able to take a good few attacks from either Kid or Law. If he takes the attacks right and Zoro helps him avoid a shock willy, he should be fine. Assuming that the master swordsmen only cut what they want to cut thing doesn't apply here, even if Law were to move Sanji in the way of one of Zoro's attacks, their skill and observation haki and inherent teamwork may allow them to either stop the attack from landing, to even capitalizing on it and building it into some sort of dual attack. Sanji and Zoro are both shown to help counter and dodge attacks the other isn't ready for. And with Zoro being able to stop Law's teleport and Sanji being fast enough and aware enough to help Zoro dodge attacks, they may just be the perfect duo to fight these two. We believe that if they were to fight in separate 1v1s, the conclusion would be a lot closer. Zoro would more than likely take out Law faster than Kid can take out Sanji, leading to Zoro either finishing off a weakened Kid or Zoro and Sanji beating up Kid with Sanji barely holding on in the fight against him. Should it be a proper 2v2, Zoro and Sanji's teamwork likely widen the gap of their victory. Now, this is the simplest way to put the fight scenario, but we know that there are a lot of factors that can come into play. Could Sanji resist Law's effects? Would Kid be able to get a damn punk off, and would that just set the match? Firstly, we do think Sanji doesn't really have an answer to getting cut in half like Zoro does. If he's doing this, I do believe either Zoro would take out Law as he's doing this, intervene by taking the focus off of Sanji, or take out Kid while he's doing this and then take Kid out right after.
Sanji as well at least has speed that can keep him in the fight and at least tag the duo, so the likes of damn punk going off, especially with the risk of hitting Law himself, is not the smartest option here. But let's say it were to go off and Law did a switch combo that hit Zoro point blank. Honestly, it's probably GG's at that point, but I do not think this is a realistic outcome. But just for those who are going to say it in the comments, yes, a damn punk at point blank range would kill any of them. Wow. What a hot take. Anyway, under normal conditions, I think Zoro and Sanji just make it out on top, but let's just give a bonus scenario where Law and Kid's fruits can work to its fullest effects. And at that point, Kid just pulls Zoro's swords away and Sanji, and Law would just swing his sword and turn him into Swiss cheese. And if they wombo combo like how they did in the Big Mom fight, he then shambles with Kid and then Gamma Knife Sanji for the finisher. I think this is a pretty cold take. I mean, Law's fruit is just insane with its range and the sheer versatility behind it. And Zoro can't really do anything if he doesn't have swords. I mean, he has the no sword style, but I don't think that's going to be enough here. If you think this actually happens and Law and Kid would just be able to do this, I hope your grandma gets kidnapped by Cypherpole. Let us know down below what interpretation you believe to be the most likely, and please don't just blindly say we're Zorotards without listening to what we're trying to say. It's gonna happen regardless, I already know, but you know, at least try. With that being said, Aeroflame, do you have any final words?
It's gonna be why Mihawk could have cut that island splitting blast from Emu in half. Look forward to it.
Peace out, guys.